that is being presented by the Comprehensive Plan Committee. A number of the members of the committee are here this evening, and I want to thank the whole committee, and especially the folks who were able to be here tonight. Jeff Hodge, I see here, and Carol Rutledge, Tony Rebior, Dick Kemmis, Joe Ellerton, Chief Mark Spawn. Let's see if there's anybody else. Sandy Weston, yes. Dave Fontecchio. That's okay. We have worked together on this comprehensive plan for 2 years now, at least. Had many heated discussions over which way we should go in different areas. I commend everybody that served on the committee. It was all done on a volunteer basis, and that's what Fulton is all about, the number of people that care and are willing to donate their time to work on projects such as this. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Dan Sittler from Saratoga Associates, who spearheaded this whole operation. And I think we have especially because of Dan's involvement, have a very good product here. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Good evening. We're thrilled that you chose to spend a little time with us this evening to review the comprehensive plan. We're at a critical crossroad. We have a draft plan that, as Mayor indicated, the committee has worked hard for 2 years to develop. And we're at a crossroads where we really need your input. Does this plan meet with your hopes and your dreams for the future of the city of Fulton as you look out over the next 10 or 15 year horizon line? And that's what we'd like to hear tonight and over the next couple of weeks as to whether we meet your expectations. So what we'd like to organize this evening is I'd like to make a brief presentation on the conclusions and the recommendations of the plan, and that'll probably take 35 or 40 minutes, and then we'd like to open it up and provide everyone here this evening that would like to make a comment the opportunity to do so. There is a sign-in sheet rooting through the room. Let's see, Carol Rutledge up here is the keeper of that. If you have not signed in, if you would please, that way we have a record of who's here. I would also note we are taking notes, so anyone that expresses a view tonight, we will be keeping not a verbatim, but a summary record of those comments, and as you can see, we're also taping here this evening. This hearing tonight begins the public comment period. It will continue from the Comprehensive Plan Committee's perspective through next Friday, which is February 7th. So anyone that would like to express their views in writing as well can direct them either to the mayor's office or Carol Rutledge over the Community Development Office. We had a few copies of the plan available tonight. I see they are all taken at this point. I will note there are 3 more copies that each will be placed in the library, the city clerk's office, and the mayor's office. So if you desire to read the document, it's available to you in those locations. Let me just start with a broad perspective. The committee really views the city as their home. Just as we have individual homes, whether we live in a house or an apartment, they view the city as their home. And as you have in any family or home, you've got different points of view, but you have one perspective of what the future holds. And that's what the committee took a number of meetings to really begin to get their arms around. At first, I think we were frustrated. We were frustrated with the circumstances of the economy and the changes of retail. It's moving off of Main Street. We're frustrated with the dynamics of closing plants and job losses. We're still frustrated about those things, but after a while the committee began to focus on, okay, those are the circumstances, but what do we do now going ahead to begin to change the the setting here in Fulton to be an attractive place for people to want to live and work and recreate, to attract people that not only live here today, but from around the region to want to visit. So that's what we set out as a goal to achieve, is to figure out how to position Fulton for the 21st century to participate in the emerging economy, in the emerging expectations about what quality neighborhoods are, and from a tourism perspective as a destination where people will want to visit. So as you look at this material tonight, we ask you to think and reflect upon, did we achieve those objectives? I'd like to learn the agenda this evening. We'll briefly introduce what the comprehensive planning process is. That may be a new concept to you. The community assets that we looked at as a group to inform our thinking. A community survey was conducted. We'll share some of the key results in the documents that I referenced that are available. We have a complete summary of the survey, of the vision of the plan, the recommendations of the plan. One element of that happens to be this map called zoning, but there are many others. And then just because you have a plan doesn't mean it's going to be implemented. So the last thing we'll talk about tonight are the implementation steps. So let's start first. What is comprehensive planning? The New York State Legislature in 1992 established these parameters for cities. Comprehensive plans are, by their nature, to be broad in perspective, to look at a broad range of issues: housing, neighborhoods, economic development, quality of life, infrastructure that affect the quality of living in a community. So we're looking at a broad set of issues. It's a plan that should define a shared vision that the community in general prescribes and holds dear, and it's intended to guide long-term decision-making. So when we're thinking about plan making, we're not only thinking about what actions do we take this year and next, but 10 years out. So it's a longer horizon line. And fundamentally, we're answering the question, what should Fulton look like? How should it function in the future? Should it be the same as the past, or should it be grounded in the principles of the past, but it would continue to evolve to respond to the needs of the future? The basic building block, we went back and looked at your old plan. Believe it or not, it was almost over 30 years old, so it was well timed to update the plan. And we added to that supplemental information from the surveys, community discussions, and the survey. Where we are in the planning process, we're right here with the committee presentation. We've developed the concept plan, the draft plan. The committee has deliberated. We presented it to the council last week so that they would be familiar with the document. And based on input from you, the community, we will finalize the plan. From here, the next step is it's actually forwarded to the city council. By New York State law, the city council is the only body, the legislative body, that has the authority to adopt the comprehensive plan. In so doing, they are establishing the recommendations as a matter of policy. Now, specific projects will need further study and detail, and that's part of the implementation process, but this is intended to set a direction. The City Council will also hold a public hearing when they receive the document, and ultimately they will be asked to adopt the comprehensive plan. So, where do we start? We first started looking around, and what we found was this really neat community. I learned this 4 or 5 years ago. We were working on the reopening of First Street, the canal area, with a group of property owners and merchants, community development office, elected officials. And I think what we learned then is we have a great community of small-scale nature, great assets, it's waterfront, good traditional neighborhoods. It's amazing how many nice neighborhoods you have. There are a couple that are in trouble, but what you have with walkable streets, neighborhoods that are tree-lined, that's what a lot of the suburban communities that we work in are actually looking for. Now, I'm not naive. There are some problems here. We're going to address those, but you have the core elements of good neighborhoods. And your public institutions, whether it's War Memorial or the library or things of that nature. So it's a walkable community, great access to quality resources, and you have good year-round recreational amenities here in the community. Having said that, we know we have some challenges. First, we're looking at the demographics of the community, looking at Fulton over the last 50-year period with a population decline of about 15%. That's not bad compared to the city of Oswego and Syracuse. But relative to the county, which has been growing, the cities have been emptying out, while the townships around us have been expanding. In part, it's a changing expectation about types of homes, lot size, but we also think it's about livability. having livable neighborhoods that people want to invest in. We also are challenged in Fulton with incomes, because incomes drive property values. And back in 1990, the median household income in Fulton was at a little over $22,000 a year. That compared just slightly below Oswego, just slightly above Syracuse. But when you look at $29,000 for the county, you see this disparity between the city and the county population around us. That equates again to purchasing power, which influences how much people can pay for rent or for homes. And when we compare that to New York State, we're well below the average median household income for 1990. And the year 2000 census is not too dissimilar. It's trending in the same direction. So we have a challenge here as a community. We have these aspirations. We want to grow. We want to revitalize ourselves. We want to be an attractive place. How do we do that in light of the fact that we have limited purchasing power? We have another challenge in terms of, on the high end of the scale, age 65 and older, we have a higher percentage of senior citizens living in Fulton relative to the county. So almost 17% of our population in Fulton is over the age 65, and relative to the county at 11%. The great part about that is we have stability, we have maturity, we have experience to draw on, but we also have, typically in that age bracket, limited incomes, fixed incomes. So they have a challenge. They have different housing expectations. At the other end of the scale, the age 18 to 24s were underrepresented relative to the county, about a little over 10% of the population in that age group, compared to about 13% of the county. That's not a good sign, because it means our workforce, the emerging workforce, has moved out. And that's a challenge as we think about employment for the future. Where will those workers come from? And we have this changing dynamics in terms of the economics. This is looking at, the red line is a decline in the manufacturing jobs here in Oswego County. It also reflects the city. In 1985, with the completion of the power plants, we kind of had this high level of employment, high level of housing needs, apartments in all forms. And then from there, 1992, the Miller Brewing plant closed. We had good news with Seal Right Hudamaki's expansion in the year 2000, and then, of course, the Nestle plant. This is a trend that we are predicting will continue to occur in the city, the county, and across the country as manufacturing right sizes to become more competitive on a global basis. That's profound, because it means as companies become more competitive, we can actually see fewer and fewer workers actually employed there so that they compete globally on a cost basis. So as we think about it, part of our future is finding jobs. Certainly we need places for the kids to work and perhaps to come back home too, but that's not the only answer to the economic vitality of the future of the city of Fulton. There are other ingredients that we need to pay attention to. One of those is quality of neighborhoods. Use that as an economic attraction tool. Make neighborhoods attractive to invest in once again. There's another dynamic at work too with those jobs, and it's this evolution from a working class manufacturing jobs to what the economists call the creative class, where you have more engineers and scientists and things like that. It's a whole restructuring of our economy. It used to be we had 5 folks out in the middle and 1 person, white collar. Today those numbers are just about reversed. So you have much more white-collar workforce than blue-collar. So the question is, where will those white-collar workers live? And quality of life has something to do in influencing that decision-making today. So one of the opportunities that we see is to participate in the regional economy from Oswego right on down to Syracuse, very commutable, short commuting. Look at ways to attract that workforce to want to live in Fulton because it's a nice place to live. Another challenge we found was a local tax base. It was interesting. We looked across a range of land uses, agriculture, residential, commercial, industrial, and so forth. We looked at the amount of assessed value and then the amount of revenue that each of these land uses contribute. And it was interesting, industrial land, as a percentage of total assessed land, occupies about a little over 5.5%. It contributes about 7.2% of the tax revenue. Commercial land occupies about 10.5%, contributes 24%. That's why communities like to see commercial development. And in residential properties, which occupy a little over 42% of the land area, pays 62% of the city tax revenue. So it's the residential properties are carrying a high burden of the tax base here in the community. And if we want to make this a sustainable community, we need to figure out how to rebalance this scale, recalibrate it to get more value out of the industrial and the commercial properties, as well as lift the value of the residential up. We looked at neighborhoods around the city. We looked at them in different quads in the Lanigan area. On a single-family average assessed value came in at the high point of $80,000 per unit. And that compared to other areas such as up in the 6th Ward, Area 9 at $43,000, Sharps Pond area at $47,000. So we have quite a range in values. And at one level, that's great because that means we have different price points to respond to different needs in the community. On the other hand, when you have this pretty much the same product, same square footage, number of bedrooms, but that range in value, it's telling us there's something going on in those neighborhoods where we have depressed values. It's time to go in and begin to fix those so that they're attractive once again for this regional workforce. We looked at the average tax revenue per acre of single-family residential. It was kind of interesting to flip this around and look at the high values again on the inner districts where we have high density, perhaps a little bit lower in individual value of individual homes, but because there are smaller lots and you have more together, you actually have a higher per acre value. So that's another clue to us that we want to make sure that these inter-district neighborhoods are working well and lift the values up. Mentioned earlier, we had a community-wide survey, I think in excess of 300 were sent out. It was scientifically controlled. We had a very good response rate, and what we learned was that of the responses, we're 95% confident it represents the community-wide perspective with a plus or minus 5% sampling error. So we have very high confidence that the responses we received reflect the view of the community. And what we heard was 90% of the respondents said, fix the water quality out at the lake. They view it as both an economic and a recreational amenity. Promote business development in order to create jobs. Improve the sidewalks, rebuild roads, promote historic preservation in the neighborhoods, improve housing through neighborhood revitalization. And when you think about this, some of this is strategic and some of it's just housekeeping. You know, it's making the place look good and function better. Other things that we were told in terms of making things better that they wanted us to think about in the plan, it was 66% in the commercial area said we need a better mix of stores. So that's a challenge, we know, because of the shifting patterns in retail in terms of how it's delivered today. But there are opportunities. If we think about 1st and 2nd Streets and Broadway as commercial districts to serve the regional market, if we can repackage those service areas to respond to the needs of those audiences. 63% said parks need better maintenance and equipment needs to be updated. Didn't hear a whole lot about we need more parks. It's keep them current, keep them updated. 55% of the neighbors said repair the sidewalks or get the property owners to take better care of their homes. Tighten along the same lines. 57% said tighten the standards for existing neighborhoods. And then areas to regulate in the residential areas, regulate off-street parking of cars, trucks, and motorcycles, the use of yards, recreational vehicles, time limits on building projects. And I know my wife wouldn't allow me to keep a building project going for more than a couple months, but apparently someone's wife or spouse here in this community allows things to stretch out over a couple of years. That was expressed as a problem. But again, this is kind of stuff that we used to, kind of know better, but apparently we have to regulate today in order to end up with quality neighborhoods that are livable. And again, if we want to serve a regional housing market, begin to re-attract the middle class back into the city of Fulton, paying attention to this little stuff is really important to make and encourage their investment decisions to invest here in the city. We ask this question about how you would use current property taxes to make public improvements. First, would you use current property taxes or support the increase of taxes? Not surprisingly, the support just about dropped in half when people were asked, would you pay for an increase in taxes? But the message here is, again, it's about fixing the neighborhoods, dealing with abandoned properties, grabbing the value out of the waterfront and fixing the parks. And even though about half the folks that said yes, use current taxes, do all those things, about half of them said no, don't raise the taxes. There was still a pretty significant constituency group in this community that say, look, we do have to make investments. And I do believe that's going to be an important ingredient going forward, that we find ways to leverage local resources, to leverage state and federal dollars over time to do the things that the plan calls for. Now, this upcoming year is going to be a tough year here in Albany, in New York State, tough year in Washington. Jeff and Carol certainly know that. You're going to have a challenging year putting your programs together. But as you look out over the next couple of years, circumstances will change, and you need to be prepared to leverage. We ask as well what type of activities or services should be provided in the community. And we ask about arts, shopping, recreation services. And services, people suggested you need more professional services, doctors and dentists, diversity of medical facilities close to home, recreation teen centers, outlet shops in the shopping area. What's interesting now, when you look at the rest of these ideas, expanding the library, more riverfront access, biking, hiking, a teen center, first-class restaurant, community events, theater, what they're really calling for is activities, places and venues, things that bring people together. And after all, that's what makes a city unique. It's the opportunity for people to come together and enjoy each other socially. And it's interesting how it popped up on the survey, and it expressed itself then in the recommendations. So the vision of the plan, kind of the stake in the ground that the committee set for itself as a challenge to make the recommendations, started with this principle. 63% of the respondents said the city of Fulton is worn out and needs to be revitalized. We heard that from the committee. Now, having said that, there's a lot of pride in Fulton, pride about its heritage, a place to raise a family, and a lot of hope for the future. So this is not a negative story. It's recognizing our circumstances and acting. Our challenge then is to reverse this downward spiral where we have disinvestment in jobs and home ownership that erodes the tax base. Once the tax base goes, we start losing the ability to pay for infrastructure improvements, whether it's sewer, water lines, parks. And lo and behold, once the quality of the place starts to erode, then the livability, the desirability. And so you start down this slippery slope of becoming the low-cost place to live. And what the plan calls for is, over time, incrementally reverse this. Start investing in things like jobs that make it a more desirable place, that supports the infrastructure, that expands the tax base, and reverse this cycle. We're not going to be able to do it all at once, but there are things we can do each and every year that begin to incrementally build progressively towards a great city, but one that reflects your heritage and your tradition. So the vision of the plan is to restore Fulton to a city of good neighbors, and we intentionally talked about it in the context of neighborhoods and industry being a neighbor. And the view is this is a community where business and neighbors can not only coexist but thrive as Fulton reemerges as a strong player in the new regional economy. So what this perspective is saying is, let's not just think about the city of Fulton proper, let's think about the things we have to do to position ourselves to be an attractive destination in the region, including Syracuse. So the goals and the recommendations, we broke it into 3 buckets. The first is centered on neighborhoods, housing. The second is economic diversity. And third is quality of life. So I'd like to review each of those. Each of those broad categories, starting first with neighborhood stability, have 5 or 6 goals and then a series of recommendations. I'm going to move through these very quickly. I'll be glad to return in discussion to respond to any questions. That's really the bulk of this report. It's explaining all those recommendations and how they work. So for neighborhood stability, it's about improving housing conditions for residents, strengthening the mechanisms for preserving and enhancing the character of each neighborhood. Some neighborhoods, like Atlanta, it's about preserving characters. Other neighborhoods, like the inner districts, we need to improve the quality. Building up neighborhood pride and maintaining the city's aging infrastructure and protecting the neighborhoods from negative impacts of business development. The recommendations are organize the mayor's response team, literally to this doesn't cost us anything. It's pull all the department heads together and start on one end of the city, and you work your way progressively around the city, one neighborhood at a time, and you look for code enforcement violations, you look for cleanliness, you look for all those things that go into making a neighborhood viable. The mayor in Amsterdam, Mr. John DeChessie, actually started this program. We've been working with the mayor extensively. And what he found happened there was the word got out. In fact, the media started picking up on the program, and they would start announcing the next neighborhood. And what happened over time is that those neighborhoods that were identified as being focused on in the upcoming weeks, they kind of started sprucing things up on their own, and it just kind of perpetuated itself. Next, developing and implementing a balanced and diversified home ownership. This is saying, look, it's time to not only meet the needs of the low moderate income groups, but middle America, middle class America, and start getting a better balance of home ownership here in the city. And there are tools through Fannie Mae that can be used to entice middle class America back in through pioneering investment programs. We do believe you should continue using your community development block grant. It's not getting any easier. Jeff and I was just chatting about how the challenging that program is right now here in New York State. But it's important to you to secure the funds that you can to help fix the basic infrastructure, and then couple that with these diversified home ownership programs that I just referenced. A new program, tax increment financing, is available when you have a real project. And one of the areas we talked about is rezoning downtown to allow higher density, perhaps seniors, market rate. When you have a big project like that where you have a commitment from a developer to come in and want to build those homes, and you can use what's a TIF, tax increment finance, to pull off the increased value in the real estate and the taxes that derive or flow therefrom, and put them back into a bond to help pay for the infrastructure. It's kind of a self-financing. You need a real project. It can't be speculative because bonds have to be paid, but it's a mechanism that you should consider. Expediting foreclosed properties. And this is looking at new ways of putting foreclosed properties back onto the market in the context not of the best or the highest bidder, but the best use that would benefit the neighborhood. It's a whole different way of thinking about repositioning stock. Diversifying the housing stock by encouraging development of moderate income, market rate housing, not just low income. Code enforcement is important. The goal is to attract the middle class. They expect these things. Revise the zoning, design, and other land use regulations to enforce mechanisms to protect neighborhood integrity. There are a number of itty-bitty, nitty-gritty zoning changes that I'll review in a minute that get to this point. Improving the enforcement of zoning consistently, prepare detailed revitalization plans for each of the neighborhoods. The committee focused on the southwestern neighborhoods of the city and did a real detailed plan. It's in the appendices of the report. We see that as a model to be followed around each of the community's neighborhoods. Developing a historic preservation strategy for each neighborhood. We view this as important. You have a distinct character. It needs to be recognized. The state is evolving towards new tax credits for preservation of residential properties. You need to pay attention to that emerging legislation and use it. And developing an awards program, recognize all the success stories that are going on here that kind of get hidden and make it visible so that people begin to speak well of their community and their neighborhoods. We recommend you facilitate neighborhood discussion groups. So that means in each of the neighborhoods around the city, facilitate little teams that get together that can then interact with the departments, the CD office, the mayor's office, the council. Should be organized through the councils, district representation. And this is a way to begin to set up a dialogue on an ongoing basis, not just when a project surfaces through project review, but develop relationships over time so you can begin to anticipate needs and respond. Develop a 5-year capital program. This is recognizing, again, the infrastructure. It's not going to fail tomorrow, we've been told, but you know what? It is getting old, and it's getting to the point where you should anticipate you're going to need to start replacing sewer and water lines. Plan for it. Put together a 5-year plan. You wouldn't commit to all 5 years in the first. You only commit to the first year. The out years are a direction. But at least you begin to get a sense of the order of magnitude and the direction it needs to be taken. Enacting a new noise control ordinance. You know, we have homes up against industrial plants. 50, 60 years ago, we didn't worry about it because most of us perhaps worked in the plant. It's just kind of part of community life. But today, it's very unlikely that the people that live in that neighborhood work in the plant anymore, And what was once viewed as, attractive nuisance noise is now viewed as a negative. And we need to figure out ways to control the noise that flows out of these industrial plants. We need the plants, but there are mechanisms you can use for HVAC control, the heating ventilating system controls, to dampen the noise. And then use consistently SEQR, it's a State Quality Review Act, to review projects. So you can anticipate as they come online what the impact will be on the community and work to mitigate. You're not using this tool to stop projects, you're using them to make them better, so that they're better neighbors. Next goal centers on economic vitality. We believe this is the second key leg to the recovery program for the city. The 6 goals here. First is creating an attractive and functional environment. You say, what are you talking about? I mean, why is that part of economic development? Well, again, the quality of the built environment influences when you're looking at a middle and upper middle income homeowner make decisions on where they want to invest. It's part of our economic strategy. Promoting historic preservation, again, we think that's a key ingredient. Advancing workforce preparedness. The needs of the workforce today are different than they were 10 years ago, and 10 years from now they'll be very different. This is not something that the city will necessarily manage the change, but needs to be aware of and make sure they're working with their partners at the community college to respond. Attracting high-tech employers. We do not forecast that Fulton will become a center for research and development, nanotechnology, photonics, informatics, fiber, but you have a very strong manufacturing base here that needs to be retooled to participate in these emerging high-tech sectors from a manufacturing and distribution back office perspective. Call centers come to mind as another example. Creating a distinctive character for downtown as a shopping destination. We're kind of in the low end of the discount spectrum right now in terms of most of our shopping in the core of Fulton. When you look again at the wealth, remember the wealth of the county residents, $10,000 higher. If we can begin to attract those dollars into our downtown area through specialty shopping, then suddenly we begin to build a retail base. It's not competing against the malls. You'll never make it. Don't go down that path. But you can provide specialty opportunities in terms of restaurants and retail. And the last goal is diversifying the city's economic base. Become more than a one-horse town. I come from Saratoga Springs, at least on the weekends I live there, and that was a one-horse town for a lot of years. But they've managed now to parlay the tourism destination into an industrial place, a college place, and now an office place centered on technology. So it's a very diverse economy, and it flows out of their core. And you have the same opportunity here. So our recommendations: develop standards to maintain and improve the quality of development. Coordinating the gateway improvements, the 481, the Broadway, the United Street corridors. Those are the commercial lanes and corridors that provide economic activity in the community. They also double up as the gateway to the community. It's the front face. So when someone's driving through the community, that leaves an impression. Now, 3 or 4 years ago, I know some plans were developed for beautifying 481. Some of the recommendations were take the power lines down, put them underground, put trees and landscaping. Great ideas. Very expensive plan. I know because we were part of that. And I think the lesson learned there is you do what you can based on your economics of today. And if we can't put the power lines underground now, at least get the landscaping started. And we'll come back in and figure out over time how to deal with the overhead. Develop a comprehensive historic preservation strategy. Mentioned that we're centered around neighborhoods. Improve job readiness and access to jobs. And then coordinating the knowledge-based high-tech business program with Operation Oswego County and the Fulton Chamber. And you'll notice here what we're doing is we're saying, don't try to play this economic attraction program on your own. Partner. It's a much bigger world. The partners that are available to you in the county have deeper resources. Partner with them to attract jobs here. But there's some things you need to do here in Fulton, and one of those relates to preparing shovel-ready sites. But what we mean by this is ready to go to market. So when a prospect comes to town, they know that they can be in the ground in a reasonable period of time. When we work for manufacturing companies around the Northeast, I'm always amazed at how shorter and shorter their production cycles become in terms of going from the lab bench to market. Used to be a year and a half, 2 years, now it's 6 months. So put yourself in their shoes. If you want to go to market with a new product, you need a new building, and you have to be in the ground in 6 months, do you think they have time to wait to tear down an old building, meet some brownfield issues, and put in new sewer and water lines? No. It's not in their interest. Their interest to go out into the greenfield sites where you don't have any of these urban problems. So we own the problems. We don't. We're the host community of those problems. The property owners that own those problems. It's up to us to figure out how to prepare these sites, work with the property owners. Nestle is a good example. Now they've made it clear what their intent. Let's rationalize that building and groups of buildings and the property, and use their exit now to secure federal and state funds where we can, or maybe we have to force the company to get involved to help prepare that property for reuse. We should not tolerate seeing the buildings stay up if they're non-productive. That's a critical resource. Up north of Black Clawson on the Route 4081 corridor, similar fashion. There's some properties in there that need to be rationalized and prepared. You are not going to be able to afford it on your own, but you can provide seed funding to leverage state and federal programs, brownfield programs, to move that forward. Next is clarifying and expediting the professional development process, or professionalize the development process here in the city. What we recommend is you put together a guidebook. What we want to do is tell an investor or a developer, please come to Fulton. We want you here. We want you to do it right. And here's how you get through the process if you do it right. And you can make it more user-friendly by doing that. Update the zoning map to reflect the desired development outcomes. Continuing to improve the physical infrastructure to downtown. I think we've all seen the little bit of improvements that have occurred in the First Street area. Now we need to take those improvements and begin to stretch them out. Down 481, across Oneida Street, across Broadway. Again, leverage with partners to use other funding sources. Implement an integrated niche framework for downtown revitalization. Waiting for the department store to return is waiting for Amelia Earhart to return. I mean, it's not going to happen. So what we need to figure out is a new role for downtown in the regional economy. I spoke about specialty shops, restaurants. There is a role, there is market, we need to get organized, and we're recommending the Chamber undertake that initiative to get that started. Over time, we may find that the Chamber doesn't want to be the day-to-day go-to person because they have a broad constituency base. So over time, what we're leaving open is how should you manage downtown revitalization? But you've got a great leader there to get things started. Maybe they'll evolve their thinking and want to be the player over a long term. That's great. If they don't, then we need to figure out another organizational mechanism to keep the ball rolling. Developing a tourism-based economy. We have a river running through here. We need to figure out a way to get people to stop. When we briefed the council last week, one of the council folks talked about reactivating the fishing opportunities. And so it's something that the committee needs to consider. Building on our environmental assets. The lake is a wonderful example of an environmental asset that is just waiting to, through renewal, reinvestment, to be a positive asset. Fostering small business and retail development. This is important. We're saying a foundation to the plan is not only attracting big companies, but small ones, the ones that employ 10, 20, 30 people. That's the backbone of job growth in America today, and that's the opportunity that we have as a community in terms of industrial attraction to bring into the community. Establishing a model home occupation. Not everybody is ready to go into a new building. Some can start in the fourth bedroom, the unused bedroom of the house. That can coexist in neighborhoods if we regulate it properly in terms of the amount of parking, the amount of signage, the number of delivery trucks, all those things that if it's too much, it negatively affects a neighborhood. But there's ways to write a code that you can get the right amount so a business can get started. So maybe it's a writer or a consultant. I'm not sure we need more consultants in the world, but it provides for that opportunity. Investing in sewer and water infrastructure we've spoken about, and then again, the city webpage, developing it more fully, not only to talk about meetings, but what's available in the city and connecting to links from tourism and economic development so you can get the word out. The last leg of this recovery program is quality of life. It's interesting, we used to think about investing in parks after the plan was completed. Now we realize with a technology-driven workforce, they expect quality of life to be in place as an attraction decision maker. So we're recommending we invest in the city's public institutions, beautify the city through greening the trees, continue to develop the city's active and passive recreation resources with particular attention on the waterfront, work to ensure that families, youth, and individuals are actively engaged and contribute to the community, promote a multimodal transportation system which includes bicycles, pedestrian, and public transportation, in particular the connection to the bus. Folks can get around the county better, live here, work someplace else, and ensure the protection of all the city's important natural resources. So those are the goals. The recommendations are, we believe you need to study the need for a downtown library cultural learning center. This is a new way to think about libraries. It used to be that was a place where you went for books. Now it's become the crossroads of the community for information, whether it's via computers, the internet, whether it's meeting rooms. I know in Saratoga we've added a cafe to our new library. I have teenagers at home. They actually go down there, and I think they check out books, but I know they're there because it's happening. It's where the community comes together. You have that opportunity, and along the way on First Street, the library, if that area is properly developed, that kind of institution can actually help rebuild that whole neighborhood. It can become a crossroads. So you need to study it, size it, figure out how to finance it. Continue investing in the city's War Memorial and ice skating facilities, wonderful facilities. We held meetings there. We suggest that you plant new and protect old or existing trees. You can start small, go to the state's tree nursery, get the little saplings, put them in a field somewhere, let them grow for a couple of years. When they get big enough, you transplant them into the trees. It's kind of a homegrown, low-expensive way to start making these neighborhoods livable again. Why are trees important? Well, they're part of that streetscape. When you're driving down the street, what's the first thing you see? You see the pavement of the road, right? Parked cars, sidewalks, and then the homes. So that streetscape, the streets, the sidewalks, the trees, all begin to shape our opinion about the vitality of that neighborhood. Now, you've got to also fix the homes behind them, but that's the first area that we see. Developing a strategy for dealing with abandoned, dilapidated sites and vacant lots. And what we recommended here, again, is a different way to think about moving these properties back to the marketplace so they can help rebuild the vitality of neighborhoods, whether it's expanding the tax base or sale to maybe an adjoining property owner so they can broaden their lawn. And that is to take an approach where you bid these properties out to the best use that benefits the neighborhood, not necessarily the highest return on dollars back to the community. Because what happens sometimes, the highest bid may actually put a use into a neighborhood that's counterproductive. So it takes a lot more thinking along the way, but it's a way, again, to start rebuilding neighborhoods. And then developing and implementing, restoring a program for key city parks. You got to keep them fresh. We've talked about that. Along the way, that means we need to evaluate the role of each of the parks in response to changing needs. We looked at the recreation study, good foundation. We'll need to keep reviewing that every 5-6 year time frame. Again, to respond to changing needs. Now, it wasn't too many years ago, we didn't know what skateboards were and extreme parks are. That's a common vocabulary and a common expectation with youth today. And there are ways to provide for those kinds of facilities in communities and mitigate the liability. Responding to the needs of the youth, I mentioned earlier, remember that one slide where we had a lower percentage of 18 to 24-year-olds in the city relative to the county? If we want to start holding on to those folks, they need a quality of life that meets their needs. And if we don't hold on to them, first the families suffer because the kids aren't home, and from an economic perspective, we suffer because we don't have the workforce. Responding to the seniors' needs, again, keeping an eye on what their emerging needs are, whether it's housing or social support food and taking care of homes and those sort of things. Developing an integrated trail system, we'll come back to that, we have a map. Continuing to invest in this should be citywide bike and pedestrian network, and then focusing on the waterfront. I mentioned the trail system. The committee deliberated how do you begin to connect these neighborhoods. So they went through and figured out down Broadway, Oneida, down the riverfront, down some key streets, on out to the lake. And the goal here is to find a way that you can walk from a neighborhood to a park safely and get there without being run over. And this is a comprehensive program. This is probably a 10 to 15-year plan. You got to work at it incrementally. Go to Office of State Parks and Recreation annually and get a piece of the money, and you start plugging away at it. And out at the lake, there's some recommendations. We'll talk about right across from the lake in Bullhead Point with some economic opportunities that we recognize as well. So those are the broad concepts. Remake Fulton based on its history and tradition as a place where people want to live and work and recreate. But what people are expecting in the next century are different than what they were looking for in the last. And it's responding to those changing needs in a way that we can afford it. Now, those are overall programs and policies. We also came up with very specific zoning recommendations that are illustrated on this map. I'd like to walk through them very briefly, one at a time. The first area was along the riverfront. We recommended creating 2 new mixed-use districts. One is downtown on the east side, between Broadway and Oneida, and then up along Route 481, creating a mixed-use district. Broadway, 2nd Street, Oneida. This district right in here, we're at City Hall tonight, right across the street. Look at a mixed-use district that not only provides for commerce and retail, but housing, high-density housing. Take advantage of that real estate. North of Oneida, up along 481, we have currently a pretty heavy industrial zone up there, and what we're recommending, again, is we need diversity of product to go to the economic marketplace. So change that to a mixed-use district that allows both office and light assembly, and do it in a way that uses design standards so that it becomes an attractive gateway along Ontario Street or Harrison Street into these northeast neighborhoods. Their forecourt affects what people think of the vitality of those neighborhoods. Some other changes. Up on Hannibal Street, the tissue factory, we're recommending that it be rezoned from industrial. It's right in the middle of the neighborhood. Change it to a neighborhood commercial use. And we set up 2 different zones for scales of commercial activity. A C1 neighborhood commercial is for light, in the corner store, those sort of things without gas pumps. A C2 is heavier, which would have a corner store with gas pumps is one example. And there's a long list of uses, but I'm trying to scale it for you to see that the differentiation. Right across the street, the Meadowbrook area, it's currently zoned R2. It's a great single-family neighborhood. We're recommending that, barring any deed restrictions, that be changed to an R1 to maintain the integrity. Down along Route 3, across from the lake, Bullhead Point area, we're recommending we rezone that from a manufacturing district, again, to a mixed-use district. Allows commerce, housing, restaurants, those sort of mixed uses that can really take advantage of the lakefront. I mean, industry doesn't need to be there, but people uses like that could really benefit from that type of address. On West 1st Street, in the area of Schuyler, we have the Fulton Manufacturing Center. The front part is converged or evolved over time to a light commercial use that serves a neighborhood. So we're just recognizing that with a recommended zone change to neighborhood commercial. Along the west side, change again this to allow for residential district of mixed-use character of retail, predominantly housing, high-density residential. Behind the shopping plaza on Broadway and First, in the southwest corner of the city, in the area of Beach and Pine, we have a vacant lot right now that sits in behind the shopping plaza. It's between the shopping plaza and that neighborhood. Right now it's zoned heavy commercial. It just doesn't make sense to us to allow heavy shopping plaza type use right up against that neighborhood. So we're recommending that we change it to a C1, still commercial, but it would be stepped down in intensity and density and use to like doctor's office, professional offices, things of that nature that are more compatible. And then implement design standards that cause those buildings to be designed in a manner that they look more like they fit in a neighborhood than a commercial establishment. So we're just tweaking things a little bit, but our sense is it would make great strides to bringing confidence to these neighborhoods about the edges. And edges are really important to protect in neighborhoods in an urban center because it becomes a limit by which you won't be encroached upon by dissimilar adjoining uses. Just below the Hudamaki plant on Route 1, Division Street area, we're recommending a couple of changes. Currently it's an industrial zone. It's that light purple color. Division Street South, one block, we're recommending we change that to heavy industry. It would serve the shipping receiving needs of Hudamaki, and it will require us taking down a couple of homes that front the shipping receiving area, installing berms, and planting trees, and then we can protect the rest of the neighborhood. We just need a little bit of elbow room to make that work. In behind that, the rest of that industrial zone along South First Street, we'd like to change from an industrial back to a residential district designation so that it's currently residential and it's pretty stressed out. It's pretty dilapidated at the moment. But give those folks confidence that they know that an investment in a home there is going to be protected through zoning. A couple of changes over in the United Street, Holly area. One is, and these relate again to changing the heavy commercial that's allowed in those areas now and stepping it down a notch to neighborhood commercial. So corner of Erie Street and 7th Street, we're recommending that area be changed to a C1. The same thing over in Cayuga and Holly. On Embry and Holly, the hotel, we're recommending that be changed from an R3 to a neighborhood commercial. We had a lot of discussion there. Should that remain heavy, high-density residential, R3, or would it be better to change the density and change it down to a C1? We had a lot of discussion on that. Maybe some perspectives on that here this evening. And then over on 7th Street, rezoning from immediate density residential to neighborhood commercial again. And the goal here is tame these neighborhoods down. Allow commercial uses at specific corners where you have uses that would actually benefit the neighborhood. Maybe it's a small convenience store without gas pumps, things of that nature. So those are the recommendations. The question is, how do we put this plan into action? First, we recognize it's a long list of things to do. You cannot do them all at once. You can't afford them all at once. You don't have enough resources to do them all at once. We need to prioritize. So we believe an incremental approach is going to be necessary. What we're recommending is the City Council adopt the comprehensive plan. Again, they are the only body established by New York State law that has that authority. They'll receive this document from the committee in final form, and it's up to them whether to adopt it as presented or to amend it. That is their right. Following the City Council's adoption of the plan, the City Council needs to cause a revision to the zoning ordinance to bring it into compliance with the recommendations. We talked about changes here. So think of it this way. The comprehensive plan is a policy document. To give it standing in law, from a land use perspective, the zoning needs to be also changed. That's a second step. Create a series of task forces that will begin to pick away at each of these projects. We'll talk about that here in a minute. And then prioritizing projects, programs, and determining budgets. And that's going to really be a function of the nature of the project in any given year, the funding sources that are available, and how creative we can be to put things together. Implementing the plan, then, it starts with the mayor and the council adopting the plan, establishing a comprehensive plan oversight committee. We're recommending that it have some kind of independent, non-political status, and that a plan leader be identified. There's no way the mayor, the council, the CD office have enough time with all the things that they have on their plates to follow through on this on a day-to-day basis. We need someone that's good when they come into the office in the morning, that's what they're thinking about. okay, what do I need to do today to further the implementation of this plan? And that person, working with an oversight committee, will be tasked each year by the council in terms of budgets and priorities. We've identified 4 categories for those activities: neighborhood revitalization, quality of life, economic development, and implementation. We further define those then, neighborhood revitalization, quality of life, economic implementation, across the timeline of immediate, that's this year, short term, and medium term. And what you'll notice in the immediate term category, just about all these recommendations are realistic in that we're not expecting a whole, a lot of new resources coming into the city this coming year. Use what you have, just organize it differently. So establish a neighborhood response team. We talked about earlier about getting that going. Creating a tree planting program. Developing an inventory of shovel-ready sites. You're not putting money into the list. You're identifying which sites you want to prioritize and go after. And then establishing a plan leader. After that, establish the neighborhood pride, quality of life, establish the recreational trail improvement committee, conduct a downtown library study, conduct the niche marketing program. We believe you need to add planning grant writing staff to help secure funds for these projects and the current initiatives like the Lakefront Committee. They've got a lot of great ideas. They need some oomph there, hands to help write grants. And update the zoning and development guidelines. And then over time, begin to develop these programs: home ownership, making the physical improvements in the gateways, developing a proactive and economic development program, downtown management framework, and then a capital investment program in the infrastructure. So we try to identify in each of these areas where you get started and how you begin to build progressively over time. I'm often asked at sometimes the communities, well, what's the one thing I need to do to make a difference? And truthfully, there seldom is any just one thing. It's a group of things being worked on in tandem. And that's what this program really is embracing, the concept of working on multiple fronts simultaneously. The work we've seen of the steering committee the last 2 years, you have it in your means and abilities. You have the volunteer people that care about this place called the City of Fulton. They have a passion for it, and I'm every bit convinced with a direction established with the council's adoption of the plan, they have the marching orders to begin implementing these recommendations. So that's the plan, and I'll just leave you with a final thought. Change does occur around us. The question is, how do we respond to it? Do we anticipate it, and then how do we respond and shape it? So those are the recommendations of the plan. As I noted earlier at the onset, copies of the document will be placed, one copy in the library, one copy with the city clerk, and one copy in the mayor's office. They will be there tomorrow morning. So I would ask you, if you didn't have a chance to, if we ran out of copies this evening, please go to those locations to take a look at the document. At this point, what we'd like to do is turn the mic over to you and provide the opportunity for each and every one of you to provide comments. And all that we would ask is you do is you come up to the mic, identify yourself so that Carol can record your name, and she's going to take shorthand, figuratively speaking, in terms of your comments. And my role at this point is just kind of facilitate so we move along so everybody has a chance to talk. The committee will listen or record your thoughts, and we're going to reconvene in a week or so to decide how to incorporate the comments and respond to them in terms of the final document that's forwarded to the council. So the more you articulate and express to us tonight, are we on the right track? Do we miss something? Do you like what you saw, or other things you want to see added? The more you can express those ideas, the better off the committee will be in shaping the final document. So that's enough of me. It's your turn. Who would like to start? Any comments relative to the plan that's been presented? Yes.
When you go back to where you are in the process, is the first or second or third slide, if the council adopts the comprehensive plan, does that obligate all of the changes that are in the plan, like the zone changes that are up there? If I have a problem with one of the zone changes, but the rest of the council adopts the plan, does that mean that the proposed zone changes are going to happen and it's out of our hands?
Good question. The council is adopting the plan as a matter of policy, which is setting a direction. But any specific changes that you'd like to see incorporated now should be expressed so that the committee can deliberate those and hopefully, respond to any concerns in what's presented in final form to the council. Once the council adopts the document, it is policy, and there would have to be good cause for deviating from the direction
So,
that's established.
To ask the question a different way,
Mhm.
if I'm opposed to some of the zone changes, then I should vote no on the adoption of this plan if the changes are not incorporated ahead of adoption.
That's one way to proceed. Another way is to clearly articulate now, while it's still in draft, what needs to be amended, so the committee will consider that, and there'll be some dialogue about what the right outcome should be.
Well, instead of doing that right now, did you write down my hours worth of questions from last week?
Actually, we did, yes.
Okay.
Yep. So the committee needs to deliberate on that. Our next committee meeting, Mayor, what did we set? The 13th? We changed it. Yes, Jeff, we changed it. What we realized is we needed 10 days for the public hearing to be open, and we didn't want to convene the committee until after the public comment period is up. So that'll be the point in time when we deliberate all comments that are received. And it's really helpful to the committee to receive specific comments. I like this, I don't like that, because the more specific you can be, then obviously the sharper our focus is. And I have pretty good confidence this committee will be able to discuss the pros and cons. Yes, come on up.
Are the people in the community well aware of how much this is gonna cost? How much a single bench costs or a tree? Because I'm Christine Haggerty. Hi. I was involved in the QRT and vandalism prevention, and we looked into how much a tree or a bench or a whole playground, how much that costs, and that does cost a lot of money. And I was just wondering if the people in the community actually knew how much it was going to cost the city of Fulton, and are they looking for any, are they giving any advice on how we can raise this money? That's my question.
Great question. You should run for office someday. The plan sets a direction, and as I mentioned earlier, the goal of the task force would be to figure out specifically how each project gets sized and funded. I think we need to retain some flexibility there because the funding sources are going to change over time. And it sounds like you're involved in maybe some quality of life initiatives here. The cost of a small tree is different than the cost of a big tree. And what our appetite is may be different than what our means are. And I think the task force need to have the flexibility to respond to that based on the circumstances of funding sources at the time of implementation.
Some of the money can be used, but not all of it, considering a bench is just so much money for people to sit on. It's just, and a playground is
resources you have and prioritize as well. Okay. Thank you. Yes.
How does this comprehensive plan affect the city charter that's in place? Will it take place of it, or how does it enact with it to ensure that these adoptions that should take place will actually trickle down through zoning and whatnot to make sure that it actually does happen and it doesn't change from each government, party over the time of the 5 or 10 year plans, so it keeps that direction over that time?
Great question. How do you have confidence that the plan will be implemented over time? The only way to have confidence is for it to be implemented, adopted by the council, and then the follow-up actions such as revising the zoning needs to be taken so that's law. The recommendations are consistent with the charter. It's consistent with the state's comprehensive plan laws. So we have that consistency. The only way to see it implemented consistently is through adoption, so it becomes a matter of policy. And the other thing we did here, or intentionally did not do, is set an exact budget for each of these. We didn't want to say, it's X dollars that the council has to spend. We think the council needs that latitude. They need to be flexible and responsive to changing circumstances. But what this does say is over time, we have got a direction now that we want to pursue. As we can afford it, as we can source funds, it's part of this individual's comment, we begin to chip away at it and implement it.
My concern is to make sure that once this is established, that your planning boards and committees have a guideline to follow to make sure that you continue on that same path. Whether it's meeting with, your city leadership and saying that, like some of these small groups that used to be formed, a leader, that they have an involvement with your planning board so that we're all on the same page. And it's great to have that direction to know what we're going into so that when these issues come up before these boards, we don't erode that basis that we're trying to establish.
I agree. And the balance that we need through all this is also protecting individual property rights. At the same time, begin to move these neighborhoods forward, to a condition of stability. And so the first step is change the zoning, make sure all the boards, ZBA, planning board, city council endorse it and understand and implement. I mean, some training probably need to be held. And also recognize that there are trigger events that will cause individual properties either to stay the way they are or cause them to come into conformance. And that's statutorily a fundamental right in this country as well as in New York State. And so change of use would trigger conformance. If the property is sold for the same use, then they have legal rights to continue on as even though it's non-conforming. Investment over a dollar threshold of 50% of the structure value would trigger conformance. So there is a little bit of art to this to figure out how quickly properties will be evolving to the desired outcome. Now that's through regulation and through property rights. There are other mechanisms that we can lay on top that are incentivizing good behavior. So creating home ownership programs funded through Fannie Mae, looking at density reduction programs where possible. Those are incentive programs that can be added in to continue to accelerate this change that we're looking for. So here in America, we have this balancing act between responding to the community's interest and the individual property owner's interest and rights. And it's a fine line. I mean, there's tension on that line. But you can, I think, begin to make progress by adopting this plan, and you'll begin to move the majority of properties in the right direction, either through regulation or incentive.
So when you adopt a comprehensive plan like this, my understanding, how does grandfathering of properties that are in a set district right now, as that changes the district, the legality of making them changes, the timeframes that are legally adopted adopted already, or is that something that the city has to take on as we change each zone?
Good question, and that will be addressed specifically in the zoning phase. What we've set through this work is a policy statement of direction of change, and the zoning, as it's written, will actually identify those trigger events where properties need to come into conformance. Again, it's a balancing act between individual rights and community interest. The grandfathering clause needs to be carefully constructed. Grandfathering means an existing use can continue even though it's out of conformance with the new zone. And there are trigger events, though, that would cause that property to have to come into conformance with the new regulations. I mentioned some of those: change in value, change in use. I know the town of Colony and commercial districts use change in ownership. Now, for a community to kind of step out with that, that's a very bold political move that there needs to be a broad community level support to undertake that kind of initiative. So that'll be the details of that will be worked out in the zoning rewriting phase. Follows this process. That becomes law.
Then it becomes law.
That's correct.
And then they would have to conform.
That's correct. Now, what happens between the phase when the comprehensive plan is adopted and before the zoning is amended? I mean, think about it. There's a little gap in there, right? Might be a couple months, might be 6 months or 9 months, depending on how quickly the council resources and mobilize. Legally, the projects of that nature are kind of in a gray area. Those that want to come into conformance with the new standards, most municipalities are allowed to make application based on the new standards, and they tend to fly through the zoning, site plan, and planning board review process unscathed. Those that want to fight it, it becomes a fight, and that still continues until the zoning gap is closed and made consistent with these recommendations. And as far as I'm aware, there's no case law in New York State that really gives us clear direction in that interim period. I would suggest that we don't become part of case law. It just consumes a lot of resources unnecessarily. But what we have counseled communities to do is go ahead, adopt the comp plan, the comprehensive plan recommendations, and then work diligently to update the zoning ordinance and map and minimize that period where you're exposed to that kind of that gray zone. Another question, please. Comment? Yes?
Approximately how many people got this survey, like more adults or more kids?
Good question. We sent it out. There were in excess, I think it was 300 surveys that were sent around, and we identified households. And it was up to the household to decide who filled it out. In terms of the respondent profile, I don't have those statistics with me here tonight. I do remember in general it met the age distribution curve of the community in general. I don't remember any big gaps in any one age group, but I need to go back and confirm it. See, I don't know if you remember offhand. I don't remember any big gaps. I remember we talked about it as a committee and felt it was pretty representative of the community. So I think it's pretty representative of what different age groups would think of relative to the questions that were asked. We need to talk afterwards. You ever think about community planning as a career? You should. You're not home much, but what the heck. Any other questions or comments, please? One more, and then we have to give the mic to somebody else. That's here.
Because we have so many senior citizens living in the town of Fulton, is that why our income is so low? Because retirement or whatever?
That's half. The question is the senior citizens overrepresentation driving the incomes? And because they lived on fixed incomes, that's part of the answer. But we also have a group of citizens that are pretty impoverished, underemployed or unemployed, which is you know, also affecting that situation. So to increase wealth, which increases purchasing power, we need to work on full employment, reemployment, things of that nature. Okay, let me get a sense by show of hands, those that think the plan is generally moving in a direction that you think is appropriate. Okay, that's great. Show of hands of those that think that there's some issues yet that we need to address. Okay, that's also good. Do you mind addressing some of those now, or maybe in writing?
My name is Darrell Hayden. Some of the issues I have right now is the last 2 years, our taxes have gone up terrible in the city of Fulton. They've also gone up in Oswego County. This whole plan may be great, but I'm not sure it's at the right time, because we've got more people going out of work this year, and if I'm reading between the lines like I think I am, what we're going to do is we're going to put an emphasis on going around, and these people that are losing their jobs, the retired people, we're going to put pressure on them to upgrade their house, to do the things they should do. We're not against upgrading houses. We're all for it in the city of Fulton. Businesses, that's another story, okay? Upgrading houses, I'm sure everybody in the city of Fulton would love to upgrade their house, make it worth more. But I'm kind of reading that also to do these jobs, our taxes should go up in the city of Fulton. That's where we're going to get the extra money to help put this program into effect. I'm not sure this is the time to do that. It's the time to talk about it, but once you put this in the books, it's going to be the same thing. People don't like it, but it's selective. Certain people get certain privileges in the city of Fulton. Like it or not like it. I worked for Nestle's 35 years, and I always thought, wouldn't it be great to have your own business? Well, I found out it isn't so great in the city of Fulton. The comments I got, and I had a nice little business, is you should have thought where you located when you put your business in this new mall down here in this new section, because you're on the side. When I asked about putting a sign out by the road, it was no. Did it ever come up for a vote with the council? No. I'm not the only person in the city of Fulton that thought it'd be great to have your own business, and I had it 5 years, and it was successful. I had people come from all over the country. I got shot down. I was so frustrated when I left that business, I would not recommend anybody to come in the city of Fulton. Another comment I have is industry. I worked at Nestle's, and we took more abuse from the city of Fulton than any place ever should take from the city of Fulton. The last thing we had was Nestle is creating dirty water. We got to take care of it. Well, we took care of it. Nestle is leaving. Cogen is shutting down, Nestle is leaving. But that's not quite the right way to take care of industry in the city of Fulton. The way to take care of industry is to work with them. And that never was the case when I was there. It was always Nestle is to blame. The last thing I read in the paper was we have some companies or some businesses in the city of Fulton, drugstores that have been here, used to be Faye's, Eckert's. They evidently aren't paying their sales tax on clothes. Well, let me tell you, the amount of clothes that Eckert's carries, I'd hate to try to live on their sales tax. But yet, we sicked the state on them and gave them a hard time. Let's hope, I'll never have a business again, but let's hope we get some people in there that really want to get business in the city of Fulton. Because if we get business and we get retail here, if we work with them, we'll get them here, but you can't harass them. You've got to work with them. You've got to influence them to get them in the city of Fulton. And for years I've heard, let's get small business. Let's get small business. Let's not talk it. Let's do it. Let's get together and let's work to get industry in here, get small business in here, upgrade the business in here. Because right now, there's not a real reason for anybody to move in here. Thank you.
Thank you. So your focus is on making it more business friendly and making it affordable. Okay, I think that's a value that's embraced by the plan. It's figuring out where industry should locate, business should locate, and making sure that it fits. In terms of making it affordable for seniors, we absolutely agree. They cannot bear any more burden. What we're looking at here, though, is looking for programs that can actually help them. stay in their homes longer, keep them up, and that means looking for programs either through the CD office or through Fannie Mae that can help them in that regard. So we agree. I think we have the same outcome in mind, making it affordable, nice place to live, a good place in which to work. Do it in a way, though, where they both coexist together, side by side, not where one negatively affects the other. Okay, any other comments or questions? Yes?
The thing that bothers me, yeah. Oh, your name. She knows it. The thing that bothers me is you haven't really thought about parking. You talked about developing what we call downtown, but if that develops anymore, where are the people going to park? Parking is a problem, and I think that is something that
Thank you. You're right. That's a good comment. We need to think about that. Sandy? Thank you. Maybe that a recommendation of the plan needs to be, focus on a parking strategy as part of the retail infill development program in downtown. Aside from downtown, First Street, Second Street area, are there any other areas that you would direct us to think about as well? Broadway, any other areas? Broadway? Any others? Those are the primary areas? Oneida? Okay. Good, thank you. Anyone else aware of any other areas in the city? Hudamaki, we've talked about how to rationalize that. War Memorial? During events? Okay. Good, thank you. Anything else?
Good evening. My name is Alma Smith, and I am the president of the Friends of History, our local history organization in Fulton. And I want to commend the committee that came up with these plans, because sitting here tonight, I think for the most part, it's a very good plan. It's a focus for the future. We know where we've been in the past. I work every day with history, and I research Fulton history. The more I research it, the more I love the city. I was not born in the city, and I do not live in the city, but I've always considered myself a Fultonian. I live very close to the city. And it is a wonderful city, and the more you know about it, the more you really love what this city has stood for in the past and what it can stand for in the future if people want to work for this. This city's not perfect. I don't think there's any city in the whole country or the whole world that's perfect, but it has a good future. That I'm sure of. And I do think this plan is workable. It probably needs some fine-tuning, but I don't think it should be shot down overall because of this little fault or that little fault. Let's work for this plan. It's workable, I'm sure. I'm very much pleased to see that the committee considered historic preservation in this plan. Our neighborhoods certainly need it, and certainly our buildings, what we have left of our old historic buildings, need to be considered too. They're a part of our past. They tell where we've been, and they tell the story of Fulton. And I think it's very important that we think about these in any plan for the future. And I certainly would be, and I'm speaking now, I think probably for all of the board of directors of the Friends of History, for the implementation of a historic district on the west side, our west side business district. It is the only intact business district we have left in Fulton, and I think we should preserve that business district. We know from other cities where those districts have been preserved, the business that comes there, it's a good future for a start of all of Fulton, and I think we should do something about getting that as a historic district. Can be done. Thank you.
Thank you. And by the west side, you're referring to Broadway corridor?
I'm talking about the West Broadway.
West Broadway, thank you.
Area, but it could go to some of those side streets too.
Thank you.
And while I'm talking, I noticed in your zoning plans, it looks as if you're talking about putting, say, mom and pop grocery stores in some cases back in the residential areas. And I want to point out that there were many in the past of these mom and pop grocery stores in the residential areas, and they commingled just fine with the residences in those areas. And I think that's a very fine plan for the future of Fulton. Thank you.
Some of these concepts aren't new, are they?
No.
Thank you. Yes.
Bob Jennings. First of all, I think I'd like to commend not only Saratoga Associates, but also the committee for what I think is a great job on a very doable, comprehensive plan. For those of you who have not been there recently, if you go to Saratoga, New York 20 years ago and visit Saratoga, New York today, the difference is absolutely amazing. And if these guys can do half of what they've done in Saratoga in the city of Fulton, we can have a city to look forward to and be proud of for many years to come. My only comment is I see in your immediate challenges, your immediate steps, to add a planner slant grant writer to the City of Fulton staff, A. And there's one thing that hasn't been mentioned, and I've mentioned this to not only the mayor but also a couple of the aldermen. From what I can see and from what I can read in your plan, it's very code enforcement intensive. We can't enforce the codes we have now. I can take the planning commission and the zoning board, we can probably take you step by step through the city and go over various and sundry places where code enforcements just are not being met simply because we don't have the manpower to do so. My point is that if we're going to get into more intensive code enforcement, either in the immediate or short-term future, it seems to me we're going to have to add bodies in order to do that, and I'm just wondering if anybody's given that any thought.
Thank you. That is an issue, having adequate staffing. And we realize with resource limitations, we can't add as many as we want. So we try to find a position that could cover a variety of topics. This is a recommendation to add staff. And it's just as other recommendations in the plan need to be studied more carefully before you actually invest. This is another one where I think we have to very carefully put together a job description that defines what the expectations and needs are. We have heard code enforcement is an issue. We have heard grant writing is an issue. There's lots of groups that have ideas but can't find funds and need help writing applications. We have heard that people coming through the review process need someone to go to for help in terms of putting their ideas together and finding their way through the process. So all what this gentleman back here spoke earlier about being business friendly, it's creating a clear path of how to move through the process. Not necessarily changing or reducing the quality of the standards and expectations, but making sure that they're clearly understood and you help applicants move through the process. So those were the big categories of need from a job description perspective that led to the recommendation. If you are aware of any other areas of need, please express them so we can add that to the discussion, throw it under the pile, and it'll help inform the council as they move forward.
I guess my larger question is, especially at this point in time, when we're a little bit strapped in the city of Fulton, where do we come up with the money to hire this staff?
It's got to be figured out. Absolutely. I haven't dug into that, but it needs to. That's part of. We've recommended a direction. We've also said we've got to figure out how to pay for it and implement it in a way that's affordable. We have not said through this plan raise taxes, have we? We've said figure out a way to achieve what the goals are by either figuring out how to use the resources differently that we have, or getting new resources to come into the community. One other point, you drew a parallel to Saratoga. From what I can tell, in having worked here in Fulton, you have one significant common characteristic with Saratoga. It's the spirit of your volunteers. 20 years ago, when my firm was involved with the plan of action with downtown, we worked with an audience just like this, of folks that care about the city, They got involved, they got in the task force and the committees, and they started making things happen. And that's going to be important as we go forward here in Fulton, is harnessing, the experience, the passion, of many more folks than what currently serve on the committees. We need to get more people involved. But the roots of the place here are great. People do care. And I think what this plan has identified now are opportunities for people to figure out, based on their interest, how they can start getting involved through these various task forces. Tony.
The neighborhood walkthrough. I think the neighborhood walkthrough with the city officials will address code enforcement in one way. They can start the ball rolling that way, which I think is a better way to go about it than someone receiving a letter or something of that sort.
Any other comments, thoughts? We can go till midnight. I like this stuff.
I'm on the ZBA now also, and one thing I like to see is we talk about zoning. We've had real estate, sell property and not even tell the people that are purchasing it that it's zoned in a particular way, and they'll work on it, and all of a sudden oh geez, I can't rent here, I can't do this, I can't do that. Like you talked about the website for the city and stuff like that. I really think it's so proactive to get a position and a staff. I mean, our zoning, they do a great job. Very, very few men. To have all this work for the city, it may seem like nobody wants to see a new salary put into a city budget. But proactively, what it does over the time of that position makes all this stuff happen. It gives it direction. It keeps it on course. And it pays for itself in a short period of time. And as much as I hate to see taxes go up here, I've lived here 26 years. I mean, I would love nothing more. I've lived in an area of Fulton myself where zoning has been a huge issue. I like to see the whole city move forward, but without the proper planning of a position where people are going to be there 10, 15 years to see that dream come true and not worry about whether it's an elected position or not, that the city needs that. And I think we have, like you said, we have every resource here to go in that direction. I like, from being on a committee, is to be able to sit down before something comes before us, to sit down as a group and say, look, this is the direction we have to go in. And it just gives you a tighter framework to work in. And people that want to develop businesses, they get a newsletter or something when they want to come into the city, and they realize, I can't put my sign next to a road because there's laws that don't allow me to do this. They're not hit with all these things that are already in place, but honestly, many people just don't know what the laws are. They don't know what the height recommendations are for fencing, screening, signs, everything, and they're all in place. They've been in place here for a long time. Once people are aware of that, and they're handed that when they come in here to develop a business or whatever, or these corridors you want to develop, these planning boards can sit here and say, okay, you're looking to do, like you did with the college over at the plaza and things here. We'll know what, we'll intermingle businesses that will work in a corridor that might run for a mile or two long. And when you have a staff that can sit down in a long term, much like you have your EDZs right now, to do this with your city for its own development is what we need. And if it costs us money, maybe it does short term, but long term, we're going to have a city that's in 10 years a better city to live in.
And there's a difference between development work, which is what your community development office does, and planning. Planning is, looking out, over the horizon line, and that's been missing here. You've been busy doing projects, to your credit, but you haven't been planning, how all these projects fit together. And I think that's why, it was timely to do a comprehensive plan. Now, to keep the ball rolling, I agree. We do need to resource a position to keep the eye on the ball. Another comment, please. Yes. You mind coming up?
I have a question. Dennis Polino. I really like this plan. I think it's needed. I think the town's great. I think it's a good plan. There's going to be some controversy about the zoning. That's where the battle's going to be when it comes down to the zoning numbers, approve or don't approve. But what's the plan of action after this plan? It seems like there's going to be a lot of opportunity to, we have strengthened industrial zones, we have strengthened residential zones, we have strengthened C1 zones, and they're very well thought out and very well planned, and they'll be good. What's the plan of action? What's the plan of who's going to go forward and recruit from the communities of Syracuse and Oswego that we want to bring into Fulton? What's the plan after that? Okay, this is a plan, but what's the action? Is that part of the plan to say who's going to do the action, who's going to have the responsibilities to take the action of recruiting into these beautiful C1 opportunities, into these beautiful commercial or industrial areas that may pop up on the river to bring in the middle classes that everybody knows we need and want. What's the action?
That's a great question. How do you implement it? First, zoning needs to be changed. That creates order. It also, when your salespeople are going out, whether it's the chamber, that's a sales organization, right? Or the economic development zone or the community development office, they have a product now. It's called a land use plan that they can take to market, to developers or investors and say, look, Fulton's open for business, and here's where we want you to fit. And here you have a home in Fulton. So changing the zoning is important because it equips your sales force, these organizations, to have a product to sell. In terms of attraction, you're absolutely right. There's all different scales, companies, small retail businesses, small businesses to big businesses. We need to go to market and attract them, let them know that Fulton's open for business. And there are different techniques and different organizations that will serve different functions. I mentioned earlier the chamber's role. They should be a leader in the downtown renewal. They've got to figure out long term how much they want to be involved in that, because that becomes a full-time job day in and day out. So we left that question open because we didn't want to impose a solution, but we sure have set a direction. Somebody needs to figure out. We think the chamber is a logical place to start, and they may decide to grow the program, really model on the National Main Street model. That's what we need. That's what the plan recommends. In terms of industrial development, your community development office partners with Operation Oswego County with initiatives now. That needs to be, one, supported, and secondly, we need to get more of the county's attention in terms of attraction. And that means that first the county needs to put together a county-wide economic strategy that in turn defines a role for Fulton in the overall context and sets a direction for them to pursue. So you need to partner there. So you notice we're looking at different types of outreach or attraction efforts sized to the market we're going after. Retail you can handle locally. Industrial, you have the resources locally in terms of land, but in order to get an attraction program, we recommend that you partner with partners around you that have a more global reach, because they have deeper pockets and can penetrate the market deeper than you could with your limited resources.
Dan, you bring up a good point when you talk about the county. I sit on the City of Fulton's Planning Commission, and one of the problems that we've had for a number of years now when we're dealing with the county is always telling us, you don't have a comprehensive plan. We don't, in other words, the county is saying, we don't suggest you do this, or we can't condone this because you don't have a comprehensive plan. How does it fit in the plan for the City of Fulton? You don't know because you have no plan in which to go by. Another reason for adopting the comprehensive plan.
Well said. Okay, if there are no other comments, and I'll pause there. That's a question. Are there comments or questions? If there are none, we will bring this evening's hearing to a close and remind you that the public comment period stays open until February 7th. It's next Friday. And if you have any additional thoughts, if you could forward them again, either to Mayor Stafford's office or Carol Rutledge. Either way, they will end up with the committee and then to us. So let me pause once again. Are there any other comments this evening or questions? Okay, being none, we will formally close the hearing tonight, and the public comment period stays open. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for participating tonight. Remember, this is just, there's a lot of work in front of us, so we hope you stay involved. Thank you and good night.
How you doing? Bill Lee, WSYR. Mind if I ask you regarding the result tonight? What's that? How satisfied are you with what you saw tonight, the entire plan laid out before everybody's eyes?
It's not how I feel, it's how the public feels about it. For the most part, I think they're positive. They realize that it is necessary, and it, with some fine tuning, is going to be a very good plan.
What are the chances of this plan being adopted? What process does it have to go through now in order to be completely implemented?
You will get the input from this next 10-day period, and then the committee.